We're recording now, and I'll be able to post this online on our site in a couple of days for those who want to review it for whatever reason, or who are going to want to share it with friends. So off we go. We're going to start with really quick introductions and then get into a couple questions. So I will start. My name is Stephen Hill, and I was an ethnomusicologist. My doctoral degree is in ethnomusicology. I'm from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania originally, but by way of a couple of other places. I was a Fulbrighter in Tanzania in 1996 and 1997. So kind of a long time ago there. And my project was looking at competitive dance competitions that originally were mixed sex and then became single sex over the course of about 60 years or so in southwestern Tanzania. Karina?
Hi, my name is Karina Aguilar. I'm actually a current Fulbrighter. I'm doing my Fulbright in Guatemala. I was a sociology major in undergrad at Northwestern, graduated in 2021, and my research is in the area of public health. We're public health and sociology, kind of a little mix of both. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm doing my research in Quetzaltepeque, Chiquimula, Guatemala, which is a city in a kind of eastern state of Guatemala. And yeah, it's on families' experience caring for the health of their children under 5, and specifically what barriers they confront. So yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Sebastian. I was a history major. I graduated Northwestern in 2013, and I pivoted into making videos through kind of getting into it later in college. I ended up getting a Fulbright filmmaking grant in 2018 to go to Cochabamba, Bolivia, and Cartagena, Colombia. And I was making kind of short form artist profile documentaries. Is the one-line description.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Moss. I did my PhD at Northwestern in theater and drama, and I graduated in 2021. I am originally from Berkeley, California, and I did my Fulbright in Poland. I was based in Warsaw, and we have 2 of us on today's call, in fact. I was there in 2018-19 for the Fulbright, and my research was on performances of Jewishness in Poland over the past century.
Hey everyone, my name is Geetha Smayachala. I'm currently a first-year dual degree master's student at Kellogg and McCormick. So I'm earning an MBA and an MS in design innovation. But I did my undergrad in choral and sacred music at the University of Southern California. And I did my Fulbright in South India during the 2018-19 academic year. And I was studying the performance, practice, and pedagogy of South Indian classical music there. Had a wonderful time. And I still stay involved in the music community here at Northwestern and sing in the chapel choir at Beanon and take voice lessons. So happy to speak about the full range of things you can do with a Fulbright.
Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Titus. I graduated from Northwestern in 2018 with the major in geology, or Earth and Planet, whatever it's called at Northwestern, Earth and Planetary Sciences, I think. It's changed like every year since. I'm originally from Pearland, Texas, which is a small town kind of in the middle of nowhere south of Houston, only called Pearland because the guy who named it thought that figs were the same thing as pears, which is a fun, delightful fact. I also did my Fulbright in Warsaw, Poland in 2018 through 2019, as this mug has kindly indicated for me. And I was looking at the geology of Poland in ages from about 100 million years to 66 million years ago. Happy to go into a bit more details on that, but I acknowledge that's probably not everyone's cup of tea.
Good, thank you. So I'd like to ask Christina to begin and just sort of give us a little more detail, take us a little more deeply into your Fulbright experience. Interested in hearing a bit more about the project, obviously, but also the social side, you know, what you do in your free time, and anything surprising or unexpected that you would like to share with us. So,
starting with me?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just to say a little bit more about my project. So I do interviews. It's a qualitative research project on families' experiences caring for the health of their children under 5, and specifically the financial, geographic, and social barriers that they face. And so I do interviews with the primary caretakers of children under 5 in the department of Chiquimula, which is the Guatemalan's version of a state is a department. In that context, I talked to them about a lot of different things. I have an interview guide that I designed that sort of goes over their experiences, with finding sufficient food for their family, seeking healthcare for their family, what happens when one of their children have a health-related emergency or just need regular healthcare. And in that way, we end up talking a lot about sort of the barriers that they face. The intention of my research is that in this region, in this department specifically, there's it's the highest rate of pediatric mortality in the country, and it is a disproportionately high rate of pediatric malnutrition. In Guatemala, about 50% of children under 5 are malnourished. And so in that space, we're able to talk about what are really the problems that are facing these families, like what are really the barriers that are coming up when they're trying to care and defend for the health of their children, because there's a lot of interventions in the area from external organizations like NGOs, the US government, Guatemalan government, but a lot of times they're not very evidence-based and they don't involve a lot of partnerships with local organizations or local people. And so the intention of this research is sort of to try and build a qualitative evidence base, really showing in the family's own words, what are their experiences, what do they need help with, to try and better inform future interventions. So that's a little bit on the formal side about what my research is. How I do it, I partnered with a university. I collaborate with a university in the capital. And honestly, like that's been a great relationship, but it's not super relevant on the day-to-day for my research. They're not very involved. I partner with a local, it's like a clinical and social work organization in Quetzaltepec at Chiquimula. And that's where I live. I live in like some dorm housing that they have there, and I help out with some of their like projects that they do, and they support my research. And so that's been a super important relationship because it's my housing in the area. It's how I've learned about the communities that I do research in, which was super important in the design of my protocol. And also that's how I physically transport around to all these different places to do research, because I go when they have a certain project that they're doing in one of the communities that I want to do my interviews in. I go with them, and typically a social worker who works for the organization accompanies me on my interviews, just sort of to accompany me, help out, and help navigate, finding the different places and everything. And so, yeah, that local partnership has been super, super important. I mean, I could not do the research without really a strong local partnership. And they support my research, partially because they're an amazing organization, and also because they, when I explained my protocol to them and everything, they were really enthusiastic about the idea that it could be helpful for them and for other organizations in the area to have this information, because that evidence base really doesn't exist. And they also had an ethics review there that reviewed my protocol and approved it, because they're the main collaborating organization. On sort of more of the experience social side of things, I think I have sort of a unique experience because my dad is from Guatemala and a lot of my family is still there, specifically in the capital, in the city. And so when I'm in the capital, I stay with my tia, and it's kind of it's a great opportunity to be able to spend some time with family. I think that's an unexpectedly like common Fulbright experience. Not that that's everyone's situation, but definitely like I've met multiple other Fulbrighters, specifically in Latin America, that are also going to a country where they have family or where their family's originally from. And so that's been really great. Definitely just like, I think one of the big things was there was definitely more, there's just like a lot of startup time to just get accustomed to like, how do I navigate these different situations? Like even just figuring out, even though I have family there and like they're so helpful with so many things, like how I was going to get from the capital to Quetzaltepec at first seemed like a really like, how am I going to do that? It's 5 hours away. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And then after like the first time that I went on the bus with someone else who I've collaborated with at the clinical organization, I realized like, oh yeah, this is like super easy. I can just take this bus by myself. And now I just take the bus back and forth all the time. It's like a 5-hour bus ride, but it's not terrible. So I think like realizing that there's these startup things of like really simple things that you have to figure out, but that they sometimes take a long time to figure out because you just kind of have to work through it. I think that's very different than like college or something where it's really formal. Everyone tells you how to do things. So that's my little blurb about things.
Thanks, Karina. I'm gonna take a little different direction. Yeah, I can, that's awesome. I feel like everything's so fresh because you're in it right now. I'm a veteran, like I finished my grant in 2018. So I've had a little bit more kind of time since then to reflect on it. And I was just, before I was kind of thinking about what would be helpful to share. I'm a filmmaker. I was in my mid-20s when I applied. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I had gotten into filmmaking late in college. I had studied abroad in Cochabamba, Bolivia, and that was where I first got exposed to documentary filmmaking. So I ended up making this application, and I had all these grand visions, and I had an incredible experience. But the thing that I wanted to share about, like, kind of with the benefit of hindsight was, I feel like when I applied, it was this, like, I was kind of seeking, I had growing up, arriving at Northwestern, there were kind of figuring out how to jump through all the hoops to find these external validations of people telling me that I was doing the right thing. And I think this was, at the time, now with the benefit of hindsight, a way for me to kind of achieve and be ambitious and strive. And it was in a lot of ways. And it was this like beautiful manifestation of that. But I had this vision that I was going to make all this stuff or do this work that was going to get recognized. And I think, yeah, I thought of it more in terms of my career. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, it was more, the experience was more like a portal or like an invitation for me to figure out more about myself. Like it kind of like started this journey of self-discovery in a really unexpected way. And Colombia, so I lived in Cartagena, Colombia. I fell in love. I met a lot of incredible people, got my heart broken, fell back in love. There was a whole journey, but I ended up like moving back to Colombia. I lived there most of the last few years. I'm currently living back in Chicago, but and I have a different perspective on the stuff that I started shooting in 2018. I kind of started this documentary project that I ended up having to leave on the back burner, and I considered it a failure for a while. But Colombia has become such an integral part of my life, and I'm bilingual, and so it really started to inform my identity in that way, but also just like to kind of set me out of my own path. And then doing this thing, we're realizing, I thought I was going to do all this work and everyone was going to pat me on the back, but it was more just like me figuring out that this is just the start of me finding my own journey. So that was the coolest thing about the Fulbright for me.
Great. I feel like I'm somewhere in between Sebastian and Karina because I was doing my dissertation research in Poland. And as I said, I just finished my PhD. So essentially what my dissertation ended up being in 2021 is now the foundation for my first book that I'm working on revisions for as continuing down the career path within academia. So I'm still very much in this research, despite having been on a Fulbright in 2018-19. My project is looking at the last century, essentially of from when Poland had regained sovereignty in 1918, and then I sort of had to artificially craft an end date. So 2018 seemed like the whole number of a century. But a lot of the work that I'm looking at now, which asks questions of the positionality of representation of Jewishness, the Jewish memory, Holocaust work, Holocaust memory, things like that, within sort of concrete foundations of Polish identity and historical narrative. This is all ongoing work as well. So actually next week, I'm going to Warsaw for the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is this huge commemorative action throughout the week. And there's performances as well as formal commemorative gatherings, all sorts of things. So this is still ongoing as well. But the year, and actually Fulbright Poland offers an extension. So Jordan and I both actually got extended Fulbrights for an additional semester. So the year and a half that I was there was really foundational for being able to access, the historical archival material that is not scanned, is not necessarily accessible via, database searching even, but really permit for in situ archival finding, as well as involvement in these ongoing memorial and sort of various types of performative practices that engage with Jewishness in the public sphere, as well as the continued formation of additional institutional projects, things like that. And again, that's still ongoing for me, but it gave me the opportunity to really forge relationships with these institutions. I did, during the first year of the Fulbright, I was involved in a doctoral seminar through the Jewish Museum in Warsaw, that has been interesting, great to have a relationship with that institution. Although, of course, institutions are complicated bodies in many different ways. If you have questions about Poland, I'm happy to talk about these things specifically. Some surprising things that are also kind of dovetailing more into social realms is that I got involved in making theater while I was there. I come from a practical background, but I hadn't expected that to be something that I would end up getting involved with while I was in Warsaw, which one of the reasons why I study that city predominantly is that it's been historically an incredibly rich and exciting and valuable theatrical space. And of course, that's still true. But for whatever reason, I didn't think that would be part of my life there. So I got involved with a group that works specifically with immigrant communities, migrant communities coming to Poland for various reasons. So sort of this multilingual group performing in Polish, but devising in many different languages. That was really wonderful and fun. And another surprise that I would just mention, and I think everyone has different relationships with their Fulbright, oh goodness, what's the word? The various institutionally housed international Fulbright organizations that Fulbright Poland was exceptional to work with. They were incredibly lovely. They're based in Warsaw, so I was also very close to them. And I got involved in a lot of volunteer work for them, including Education USA, which is a partner program between Fulbright and the US Embassy. So I got to work with a lot of Polish students that way in high school. And something that I was also surprised to come around to was an interest now maybe in foreign service at some point down the line. I spent a lot of time working or getting to know and then working at various events with the US Embassy faculty, not faculty, the officers, and in particular the cultural ambassador, as well as the cultural attaché and folks like that. So getting to know there was a space for people like me who were interested in cultural creation, who were interested in cultural history, that were working in foreign service. That was news to me, and I was really excited by that. So yes, I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I can tell a bit more about my Fulbright story, how I got there and what I did. So for me, I went to USC, which is a great music school, but I was primarily studying just European music. I took one world music class when I was there, but I always felt like Indian music was something that was interesting to me. I'd grown up hearing that kind of music, but there was nothing in my education that helped me connect with music by and for people who looked like me. So when I learned about the Fulbright, it seemed like a great opportunity to learn more about the music of my heritage. So in 2018, shipped off to India, started in New Delhi with training, but then ended up working in a small, like a tier 2 city is what they call it, had a few million people on the east coast of South India in a town called Vishakhapatnam. I worked with 2 music institutions there. One was a university that had a good music school, and the other was like a private music organization that offered community lessons. So I was working with the teacher there. And I think rather than like qualitative research, I was really focused more on performance. and learning how to sing that music, learning how to play it, learning how to notate it. So the output of my work was, I've written some papers, I've done some presentations on how Western music educators can adopt this kind of music, but my work culminated actually in 2 voice recitals that I gave at the end of my time. So a little bit different, I think, than some of the other projects we've heard, because I was really immersed in taking singing lessons every day, taking language classes, learning how to notate the music, taking music history classes, and just attending tons and tons of concerts. So I really just felt like I was just enveloped in music all day long, and it was just an absolutely wonderful experience. Similar to Rachel, the Fulbright administering organization in India was amazing. It was called the US India Education Foundation. And I felt like I received a lot of support and help from them as I was getting settled, and also found ways to be involved in the community through them. I was able to teach choir at a local Catholic school for underserved girls through the US consulate Hyderabad. And so that ended up being a really lovely thing I did every 2 weeks, where I got to sing with the girls, help them practice their English skills, and just feel more engaged with the people that I was working with. So I was really grateful for that experience. Then I guess something else surprising was about how, Fulbrights are so fun, but things, especially when you're living in a foreign country, can always go wrong. But my housing situation ended up falling through about halfway into my Fulbright. So I didn't have anywhere to live. And I actually ended up just moving in with my teacher, which was the most incredible experience. So she's a professor of music at the local university. She was like, I've got an extra room, you could just stay with me. And I think because I lived with her and her family for 5 months, our relationships are so close. I just went back to India in December to visit friends and family, also saw my old teachers and classmates, and then stayed with my teacher for a few days. I think what surprised me really was the depth and how these relationships last even after you've left the country. And I feel like now I've got, family in India that I can visit whenever I want, and a mentor I can lean on for support. So just the enduring nature and the depth of those relationships is something I'll always, always be grateful for. Yeah, I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you.
Hi. So I guess I wanted to go to Poland. Basically, I work on paleontology, and sort of old school taxonomic paleontology is essentially dead in the US. There's 1 or 2 universities left that maybe do it. And it's not something I wanted to focus my career on, but something that was important to me. And Poland has an extremely good program in that. And, we don't have to go into why I chose, what exactly the reasons were, but Poland was a really good fit for that reason. And so that's why I applied there. I think there must be a theme between going to Poland and getting books published based on your experience in Poland, because my book came out last year, which is nice. I'm aware of a third person from my year who also published a book based on their time in Poland. I don't think this is normal at all. I think this is really weird. But it was really productive. I really enjoyed my time there. I guess otherwise I probably wouldn't have applied for an extension. I've gotten 5 manuscripts at publications out, and a book apparently, which is something bizarre. And I still continually work with the people in Poland. Even in December, my Fulbright advisor, I don't know what the right word would be, mentor, whatever the right word is, he came to Texas, and he and I spent 3 weeks in the field in Big Bend doing paleontology, which was lovely. Socially, I know we're behind schedule, so I'll try and go quickly. Socially, I had a great time there. I'd say most of my interpersonal interactions were focused more so on the geology department. I think geologists are weird people who tend to stick together anyways. Takes a certain kind of person to find joy out of looking at rocks all day, every day. And so, we cluster, but I really enjoyed my time there. My partner is a Polish graduate student at that university, and I'm actually heading back there in 2 or 3 months to visit her. So, long lasting, durable ties. I'll wrap up there, get us back on schedule.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much for those of you who are joining us. I'm guessing you did not expect this really, really wide range of projects and of different kinds of experiences, but that's really built into the Fulbright program. There's 140 countries you could go to, and of course, your own experience in that country is going to be different from other folks. But let me turn to Sebastian and ask you if you could do your Fulbright experience over again. Is there one thing or two things that you would probably want to do differently? Or did you nail it? Did you completely nail it this time?
I didn't nail it, but I wouldn't do anything differently because
Okay.
I think that
That's-
not like the things that have become clear to me over time, especially about the work I was doing there, and like I referenced, kind of seeing the like all these things that needed to percolate in my brain. I like process things really slowly. So the one thing I didn't do, which maybe I would think about differently, was like considering the post-production of the documentary or content or material I was shooting, where I was so kind of like getting after it and working on all this stuff and filming and meeting people. And then the grant ended and I got back to the States and I was like, okay, I'm broke. I need to like work and find, and I kind of got back into work mode. And then the stuff that I moved back to Columbia, and but with that said, I don't think I would change it, because over the subsequent 5 years, there's been so many challenges in my own life that were like beautiful in the way of like kind of pushing me to grow and evolve in my own way. So I don't think I would change anything. One thing I would say though is to appreciate the days. Like I lived in Cartagena, I was living on the beach, and like I think I sometimes still, I hadn't fully left behind my Northwestern work, but not necessarily Northwestern, just American kind of like hustle culture thing where like, man, I was living, like my rent was paid. All I was trying to do was meet people and work on these video projects, meeting like really talented, creative people. And I think I could have done a better job of just like being grateful for that every day.
Good advice. Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could move back to Warsaw in a heartbeat. I think it's an experience we might all share, is kind of falling in love with your Fulbright base. I similarly, I don't think I would really do anything totally over again. I'm very happy with my experience. I'm really grateful for the time that I had in Poland. But and this kind of dovetails into also the next question. In being very, very well prepared early on in the application process, I found a quick connection to the person that would become my faculty host. And going in as a doctoral student who was working on very specific independent research, I knew that relationship would be different than someone who was, working directly with someone in a lab or something like that. My relationship was always going to be different since this was my research only. But I think if I did it over again, I think I would find someone that was a little bit more closely aligned to my field, that was less connected to, my Northwestern connections. Maybe that's how I ended up with my host, who was wonderful and generous and all of those things. But maybe I would have taken a little bit more time to kind of invest in forging a new relationship with someone who was maybe a little bit more in my more specific field, such as it is, because in Polish Jewish studies, the most scholars who work on this subject are based in Poland. Surprise, surprise. And I think that would have been a different experience than the one that I had. So that's what I would say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I would change anything about like what I did in country. I agree with what Sebastian was saying, like being grateful for every single moment. I was also living on a town right on the beach. Just like absorbing how special that experience is, especially like now that I'm, doing math and economic modeling all day long, like being so grateful for the opportunity to be able to sing like all day, every day. Definitely something I'll hold close to my heart forever. But I would say the one thing is I was like a music performance major in college. So doing qualitative research, archiving my recordings, taking good field notes, understanding how to synthesize my findings was a new skill. Like I worked really hard on my application, but like once I got to country, like I knew how to take lessons, I knew how to perform, but I didn't really know what it took to be a good researcher. So I think doing a little bit more preparation on that side, like I'm still working on like archiving all of my recordings, and I have volumes and volumes of music that I brought back that I need to get through. So I think like if you're not coming from like a humanities background, just being prepared for some of that work and that learning curve that you're going to have to do in country when you return.
Yeah. So I guess a couple things. I mean, I really wouldn't change much, if anything, right? And that's probably something my therapist has been trying to drill into me, that I can't change the past. So why would I think that? Good life advice too. Housing can be complicated coming from a foreign country, like coming from a different country. And so I would recommend having more of a plan than what I did, which was just show up and hope for the best. Worked out, not the most rational way to do it. I guess one other thing is that like the American work ethic, or maybe it's in particular the Northwestern one, is like completely different, and that has implications if your like main work is like in a university setting. Like I realized like probably 6 months in that I was like spending so much time, more time working than like everyone else, you know. I mean, the university was the geology faculty there was a little ridiculous, even by like standards I've heard of. Like there was like daily wine hour at 3 p.m. So nothing ever happened after 3 p.m. And we didn't really get into work. People didn't really get into work until about 10 p.m. So we're talking about effectively like a 20-hour, 25-hour work week, which was great. But like definitely very culturally different. And so, you know, embracing that insanity can be very useful versus not embracing it and trying to work through it. Other than that, though, I don't really have, you know, much to I wish I had been, you know, more organized and had more opportunity to do field work, but, you know, that's not something I can predict being in country and when you're dependent on other people. And so I'm not going to dwell on it. Overall, though, wouldn't change much at all. Maybe would be more organized on housing.
So Karina, you're still in the field, but do you have regrets from the like last week, things you wish you had changed?
Always. I feel like at least when you're in it, like it's always like you look back on how you did things last week, like you said, and you're like, oh shoot, I should have done that differently. I think kind of related to that, there's just I think for a lot of the work that I've done, there was no way to really adequately plan for it. It kind of just like changes so much once you're there, and just kind of how schedules work. I think that it's just that, I guess it's just to say like all of my work in Guatemala so far has been very flexible, and things have sometimes changed like in one meeting, you know, where I was doing my data collection changed completely, like things like that. I think that it is maybe a bit of like a cultural thing in part of just like having a lot more flexibility, especially I think with some of the organizations I work with, like the clinical and social work organization, whichever, if anyone wants to look up, it's called Paz y Bien in Quetzaltepeque, Guatemala. And they're amazing. And I think sometimes trying to do like a lot of these like big projects that they're doing for people who have a lot of needs, and working with resource restraints, significant resource restraints from at their organization, there's just a different way sometimes that things need to be done, where you really like maximize, you know, okay, like tomorrow there's someone who from this area who's driving to that area because they have to like drop off these things, these, you know, these resources to this community. And so you can hop in the car or on the motorcycle with them to go there to do some of your, you know, interviews if you're ready at like 7:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. And it's like, oh, okay, that wasn't an area that I was planning to do interviews, but actually it can totally be replacing this other area that you don't have any projects in the next many months. And so I have no idea how I would get there because it's not a very accessible place to go. So I guess all of this is to say, that was just one example, but all of this is sort of to say that I think something I would do differently was maybe not trying to force things. I think sometimes I would try to have a plan, and then like that plan would end up really changing, but I might have put a lot of work into like writing up a justification in my protocol for why exactly we're going to do it this way. But then it actually just changes because that way is not possible and we have to do it this different way. And so I think maybe like embracing that a little earlier, just to save yourself the trouble almost. Or even in terms of like actually being more productive and more effective. It's not just about saving yourself the trouble of like, planning out this whole thing really specifically and then having to change it all because things have to be flexible, especially if you're working in an area that is, rather resource constrained. But I think it's also that it makes you approach things differently and be a better collaborator for the people you're working with. If you're approaching it as like, so I have these ideas, I think that this would work, but please tell me about, what seems best for you all, and then let's make the plan that works best for everyone. I think I've learned to approach things like that, but maybe at the very beginning I was a little bit more like, so here is what I want to do for this research. This is the protocol. Here is the plan. And I think that makes it more difficult for your collaborators if you're trying to do something that maybe is a bit ambitious and a little bit hard to execute. So I think that would be one of the big ones. And then I think another one would be that just really considering what you're signing up for in terms of like where you're going to be, where you're going to be living, what your days are going to look like. I've been really happy with my project and like where I am. Like I really love the community that I'm in and everything, but I'm not living on a beach. I do live in like a very small room. I mean, it's not tiny, it's good, it's wonderful and I love it there, but it's definitely things like it's very hot in the year right now there, and there's no air conditioning and very small windows and a lot of bugs. And the bus ride to get from in the capital where I can stay with my family, or where I can even fly in and out of, or where I sometimes have meetings at the university, to where I stay, it is like a 5-hour bus ride. It can be rough sometimes. And so just kind of things like that, I've been really happy with it. And like, I think I'm in an extremely privileged situation of being able to have the resources to do all these things. And, when something gets, like if it's, a really hot time and I'm having trouble sleeping, like I can afford to take a bus back to the capital and stay with my family for a little while. But I think just like, maybe I wasn't aware, I didn't really think through enough sometimes beforehand. Like, okay, cool. So I'm planning in the next week to take like 3 bus rides or like 2 trips back and forth from Quetzaltepeque because I have things here and I have things there. And then I'm going to do data collection in these communities, which is going to mean like a 2-hour drive to these villages. And like, sometimes I would plan all that out and be like, yeah, this is totally possible. And then when it ends, I'm like exhausted. And it was like, that was in fact possible. That doesn't mean it was a great idea. So I think, yeah, those would be sort of my, in retrospect, even though I'm not actually in retrospect yet, because I'm still in current spect. That's obviously not a word. Yeah.
We're gonna believe it's a word. It's a word now. So I'm sure everybody here knows that this office, my office, the Office of Fellowships, we manage the application process, and so we're quite keen to give you the opportunity to learn about that, assuming that you are thinking seriously about applying for Fulbright at some time. So I'd ask Rachel to start. If you have any thoughts about your own application process, maybe things that work really well, you would encourage people to do, things that didn't work so well that you would urge them to avoid, it'd be great if you could share some of those.
Sure. I mean, as I said in the last response, starting early with planning all your elements, and obviously working through the Office of Fellowships, which you have to do, but is a really good idea also to do, and following their timeline, which, as if I'm remembering correctly, is also very early. I'm receiving no compensation to say this. They have a timeline that's set up in order to build in things like some advice on your application. I think there's one draft in there somewhere that you get feedback on, as well as a mock interview, which was really helpful and instructive, but also things like using the application library that is used to be, maybe still is, downstairs in the Office of Fellowship. And they have, these giant binders of what has been successful in terms of various application processes, but especially Fulbright in this case. I looked through those. And then things like starting the process of finding your affiliate if your program requires that. or I think that's especially for research Fulbrights, you will need somebody to kind of agree to say that yes, you are a person who can be here. Mine was through a University of Warsaw. And so there's also paperwork that they have to do on their end as part of that whole process. So this takes a lot of time. I think there are various other component parts that you probably also need to order things, official copies and things like that in advance. And it will serve you well to begin all of this earlier than later. That was my main plug, I believe. Nothing was a disaster, thankfully. I mean, I got the Fulbright, so yes, I'll pass it on.
Sure. I guess what I'd say is that it's really important to have like a mentor and like so a few good reviewers in your corner. Like my musicology professor was really instrumental in helping me develop my essays. And then something that helped me a lot too was I went to India. So having somebody who was from India review my essays was super helpful because the way the Fulbright review process works is that it's reviewed here in the US and then it goes to in-country reviewers. So making sure you're really capturing the perspective and the spirit of the country you want to visit is important. And I remember like when I had a friend from India who is an artist review my thing, she'd found some like language that, you know, maybe wasn't as inclusive as it should be, or like just wasn't as it just like wasn't quite the right fit and could be something that comes off as a flag to an Indian reviewer. It's no fault of my own. It's just growing up in the US, but ensuring that you've really got an inclusive lens to and bring that human-centered lens to your essay, I'd say is really important. So A, find a mentor, B, find someone from that country who can read your essay ahead of time.
Yeah, it's hard for me to comment on like what was a disaster versus not, because you don't actually get feedback, and I got it. So I mean, you don't get feedback from like, you know, the reviewers or anything. I guess in my case, I mean, trying to find a mentor as early as possible, it would be great. I mean, I started reaching out to this guy in like April, and it took me till like September to like nail everything down. So, you know, I feel like you can't go too early on that. The application itself is kind of weird. Like, it's not like any other application I've ever written. Steve could probably tell you more about that. This is all like memory. Like certain subcommissions will have interviews after you get past the US stage. So that's like something to be aware of. And you might have to be prepped. Like I got tested on my Polish in that, which was fun. Because my project didn't rely on all Polish, but you know, wasn't prepared for it, but it worked. Steve, you don't receive compensation for working as
It doesn't feel like it.
Okay, sorry, that was off topic.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, yeah, I mean, it's a strangest application, so just be aware of that. But I can't really think of anything that's too critical other than like reaching out really early. I guess like quick plug, because like country, no one's going to talk about this, but different countries pay very differently, and that might be something to be aware of. You know, my general impression is that Eastern European countries pay really well compared to cost of living, whereas something like France, you know, you might actually be below the poverty line. Just something to think about. And also, since no one else is going to mention it, Northwestern has a great track record of getting former Fulbright scholars from our university onto the bachelorette. So that's something to keep in mind.
That's how I get evaluated every year. My performance really depends on that and only that. Karina or Sebastian?
Oh, I can go, but yeah, so I was going to say, definitely echoing what Rachel said, to start early. I come from the other perspective, which is that I started very late. I think that Dr. Hill will probably remember this, that I emailed him with all these ideas of like, hey, I think I want to apply to this thing. I literally think it was like days before. It was very, very late. I would not recommend that. If you end up in that situation, like it can be okay. It was fine. But I definitely wouldn't recommend that. It was just very stressful to do it that way. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome that you all are here and learning about it early, because I literally learned about it like very soon before. And I was like, definitely want to apply to this, but is there time? There was, but it was super stressful. So related to that, I saw that there were some questions in the chat about the process finding affiliates. So I can just speak to that real quick. For the affiliate at the university, so I have one affiliate who's a professor at a university in the capital. For that, I literally just found a professor that was in the field, kind of relevant field, which honestly, like, it's not that relevant. Maybe also sort of similar to what Rachel was saying. I think that is something that is sometimes I could get more support from my professor advisor if their work was relevant to what I do, but it's really not. He's a sociologist, but like a political sociologist, but was like a sociologist that I could find, and cold emailed and was like, hi, like, I'm looking to apply to this thing and I need an affiliate. Could we speak over Zoom and talk about my project? And he was really great and like down and, signed on to affiliate with me and was excited about the research. So that was great. So that one was kind of like literally just like looking up professors online, and cold emailing people. And then for the clinical association that I found and am working with, I had started, sort of doing some research in Guatemala about like sophomore year of college. So I had quite a bit of existing relationships with people. I did my thesis related to pediatric health crises in Guatemala. So I had some of those existing professional relationships. I had worked previously, I'd done a sort of internship at a different clinic, and then that I had found through like asking family and friends about, mostly family in the area, about like, hey, do you know any like clinics in the area that work as kind of like safety net places for a lot of people in the region? And then like through that clinic, met a doctor who knew someone at this other clinic, and that's how I ended up getting that connection there. So very like contrasting of just like cold emailing someone if you don't know anyone, but then also the option of like if you have family in the country, you have friends in the country or anything, definitely sometimes it can come about more like through a person who knows a person who knows a person. And that is actually the relationship that is super duper relevant to my work. And I don't think I would have really like found and cold emailed this association had I not kind of like found the way through just like asking a lot of family and asking people I've worked with previously for recommendations. So yeah, so I think that's also a consideration. And also if I had had more time, it would have been, had I not had a lot of those, like had I not already worked with this clinic through finding it through those ways, I could have done that in the process of applying for the Fulbright. And then, oh, the last thing I wanted to say on the application was just that there are things, I think, there are things that you'll put in your application that you're just not going to do. And then there's things that you're going to do that were not in your application at all. And I think just like recognizing, well, if you plan to apply and you're working on your application, recognizing while you're working on it, like you're not actually married to what you're putting down. It can kind of, and sometimes it might be like oversimplified because you're not sure exactly what you're going to do in that way. And you know that you're going to need to find it out later, but you need to put something down because you need to show that you have a concrete plan. And I think like a good perspective that I heard from someone who was actually applying for a different grant on this was that like part of the grant application process is more to show that you know how to design a plan to do something like this, not necessarily that this is exactly the design for what you're going to do. An example for that for me was that I really struggled with a question that was on like, what's something outside of your research that you're going to do in your host country to like, I can't remember what the question was exactly, but it was sort of a very Fulbright specific question. And I struggled with that because I was like, well, I don't know exactly how to like say this in advance. A big thing that I do now is that I was actually asked to teach a class at the university. And on the weekend, I teach a class on quantitative methods for social science research using R at the university, because that's something I was asked to do. And like, that would be a perfect fit for this question of like, what's something you're going to do outside of your project to sort of like contribute in the environment that you're working in. But I had no idea I was going to do that. And the thing that I actually put down is not something I do at all. So yeah.
Let me ask Sebastian if he has a couple ideas about what about his application process he wanted to share, and then we're going to get into questions.
Two. They just want showing you have the skills and the connections to execute what you say you're going to do. That's a synthesis of what everyone said. Also, rejection isn't the worst thing. Don't do this unless you're actually serious about it. I tried to do an ETA at the end, English teaching assistantship at the end of college because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I justifiably got rejected because I didn't take the application seriously. And it wasn't until I was actually ready to be intentional about it that it ended up working out for me a few years later down the road. So even if it doesn't work out this time, maybe it's just not the right time for you, but rejection can be a good thing.
Good. So we're going to turn to questions. I'm going to read one right now from earlier in the conversation. If you would care to unmute yourself and ask a question directly, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll kind of go through the chat and you can continue to put them in the chat. So question number one, did you have any support in building those relationships, i.e. at the local university and social work organization? Did that support come through Fulbright or somewhere else? Thanks. So I will jump in quickly and say that while the folks from Poland had a great experience with their Fulbright Commission, that is not universal, not universal at all. My experience was orthogonal to what Rachel and Jordan are describing. But the thoughts from any of the panelists on that?
Yeah, so I didn't have any help from my university, my professors or Fulbright in figuring out like where I was going to study South Indian classical music. It's a very niche field. So finding an institution was really tough. But what I ended up doing was that there was an artist who I'd seen in Los Angeles like years before who sang that style of music. I found her on Facebook. We had a bunch of calls and she recommended these music institutions to me and ended up writing me a letter of recommendation also. So it was a bunch, and then she connected me with the existing teachers and you have to get a letter of affiliation and have them sign it. So it was a ton of like WhatsApping and Facebook, like cold calling that like miraculously worked out. So I know a lot of people who really take it into their own hands and that seems, it has worked out. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I hesitate, Rachel. I think I'll briefly say something. You can say if you agree or disagree. I think Rachel and I both came in with like pretty niche self-designed projects, and so like I wouldn't say the Fulbright Commission was necessarily useful for designing our research or getting us access to that. It was more so useful for like the social side of things, like the outreach type of stuff, the interacting with embassy type of stuff. And also because they like gave all of our visa fees for free, which was awesome. You know how much I said like $400.
I know. Well, the Polish embassy in Chicago is a really nice place, let's just say. But yes, I was gonna echo that same thing actually that Jordan was saying, was that I think in any Fulbright setting, you are expected to be a self-starter and someone who's going to be able to network and find the connections appropriate to your own research. Our commission was incredibly lovely, yes, for all these social connections to the US Embassy, but not related to my scholarship or my research. That was all boots on the ground work that I did independently and that Jordan did as well. One thing I just wanted to add, from what Karina was saying also, is that one of the biggest resources that you have in finding those kind of connections in various countries, as well as your affiliate, is Northwestern. So there's an enormous and impressive internationally renowned faculty at that university. So again, I'm not being paid to say this. Please use folks that you know, use connections between faculty people that you don't yet know, but with people that you are studying with now. The odds are there is somebody who might be loosely related in some way to the country that you're interested in or the work that you want to be doing. And those are your resources as a student at Northwestern. So go to, I say, and make those kind of connections. And those are the things that can also help you get really great host institutions or connections on the ground in the countries that you want to work in.
Yeah, I mean, like I got the idea for this project and the connections because I was camping with a professor and maybe on some serious substances in Colorado. And if any of you guys know Earth and Planetary Sciences, I'll let you guess what faculty that was. It's not a very hard guess. But like, yeah, abuse your connections here. They're great.
Yeah, and I did not pay them to say that, but that's exactly what I say over and over and over again. It just sounds different when previous Fulbrighters say it. We have questions in the chat about the affiliation, and that could easily consume the rest of the time here. But let me just say that I've been in this chair not this chair, this is a new chair, but a chair very similar to it, for close to 20 years. And I have never seen that anybody who really was like put the effort into it was not able to find an affiliate, even on really, really short notice. Everybody here has 6 months minus 2 days. It was 6 months from Monday when the Fulbright deadline is going to crop up in October 10th. So it's not easy. It is tough. It's going to push you. It's going to stretch you. But if you put yourself into it, 99.999, I can guarantee you are going to find an affiliate and you can move forward with your application. So let me sort of close that topic for now. And I'd be very happy to have appointments. If you're an undergrad, you should be able to find me on ConnectNU. You can set up an appointment that way. If you're a grad student, you can contact me directly. Do all research sites have a language requirement? No, but for Steve Hill, they do. So there are 3 categories of language. It is either required, recommended, or not required. I forget exactly what that one is. With the exception of the United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. As far as I'm concerned, you do need to learn something of one of the major local languages that are spoken in that country. There's a lot of places where you can get by with English pretty well, but that English is not the native or the host country's language. It is, in my mind, a bad look if you say to the Fulbright Commission, you say to the people in that country, hey, yeah, I want you to bring me over to your country and pay a lot of money so I can hang out here, but I'm not really interested in learning your language. Yeah, I don't know, I'm busy. I got to wash my hair, right? That if that's what you're trying, I know I don't have much hair, but I wash it anyway. If that's what you're really saying with your actions, it's read that way, it's understood that way. And there's a good chance that the people in that country would be like, well, maybe we can find someone who has learned a little bit of our local language, who is being respectful to the people in this country and want to communicate with them in their own country. So even if it says language is not required, I think that if you are really serious about putting together a strong application, you will put that effort into it, even if it gets you up to what Fulbright calls the hospitality knowledge. Hospitality knowledge is just your ability to politely greet folks, to say hello to an older person in their own language. Karina?
I just wanted to add one quick thing on that. I think it's so true that, like, I mean, if I was trying to do the project I was doing and I didn't speak good Spanish, it just would be completely impossible. And so I think, like, if your project requires that you're going to be like talking to community members, you need to make sure that you can talk to them. So that's like kind of obvious, but I just wanted to say that, like, I think learning a language can be really intimidating, and people also, if you know language, especially just from like, you know, if you have like a heritage background, you know language, but maybe you never like formally studied it, or if you studied it in school, but you're worried, you know, like you're not very conversational. I think that it's really about like putting in the effort and trying, but I think it's can sometimes be a barrier that people, you know, are scared to apply, because I think it's scary to like not know, to feel like you're not, you know, able to talk well or something. I think it's a hard process. And so I would encourage people that as long as you know some of the language, that your project is feasible with the level of language you have, even if that requires that maybe you'll have to have some supports or something. I think that don't let like any fear about like maybe my language isn't good enough stop you from applying. And I was just going to say on that, like, I do speak Spanish largely from just speaking with my family, but it's not like perfectly fluent. Like, I make a lot of grammatical mistakes and say words wrong and sound silly sometimes. And I think that's something that for some people could maybe stop them from feeling comfortable going forward. And sometimes even in my interviews, sometimes I make mistakes and the social worker from the clinic that comes with me will be like, oh, that's not what you meant to say or something, or I'll have to repeat something, or I won't understand something that's, you know, said to me. And it can be a little bit of a barrier, and sometimes I feel self-conscious about it, but I think it's really just about like always trying and putting in the effort. And yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes that can be a intimidating barrier.
Good. We're past our time, so I'm going to call this panel to a close. And I'd like to thank very much to Karina, Rachel, Sebastian, Geetha, and Jordan for sharing their experience with us. I think they all put their contacts in the chat, so you can talk with any of those folks. I, of course, live here which is a little more accurate than I might want it to be. But I'm here, and as a former Fulbrighter, really excited about the program, would love to help you think about it, even if it's not ultimately what you want to do or end up doing, that's fine. Having the conversation is a good thing anyway. So the recording will be up in a couple of days. You could share that with friends, and just again, thank you to the panelists. So